But it's fascinating that the people are attacking Tucker for bringing you another version of events, like they attacked him when he sat down with Putin, because that almost should be the media's job if they were actually the fourth estate and were actually interested in making sure that our governments were not becoming too corrupt. They wouldn't attack journalists.
So Tucker Carlson's recently come under fire for having the nerve to interview the president of Iran. Gasp, imagine that. So Candace Owens is here to chime in on that, to talk about her feelings about it and the controversy that swirls around this, because you would think that the pursuit of truth requires getting different perspectives from around the world about the same events, but do the critics of Tucker really care about the truth? Let's see what Candace has to say. Please like my video and subscribe to the channel.
We got to talk about Tucker. Yeah. Tucker Carlson's at it again. He's pissing off a lot of people. And pastors, apparently, also, along with me. And he did this thing. Like, journalists used to do this thing, or maybe they never did this thing, but Tucker is doing this thing where he seems to not necessarily trust the narratives that are being provided by the mainstream media. And he thinks it's better to go directly to the source of their ire. And so when they're going, rah, we got to go to war. And let me tell you, we are not finished with Iran. Okay, do not be foolish. Oh, the 12-day war, LOL. Israel's defense systems were obviously low and they need to be replenished. That's my take. I'm sticking to it. Anyways, Tucker decided, hey, this would be a good time to maybe interview the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian. And he did. He announced that interview on Saturday, and immediately, strangely, the Zionist lobby people on X were having a mental breakdown. Let's show some of these tweets. Who do you got? Arsen Ostrovsky writes, "So much for America first. For you, Tucker, it seems to be Iran first." Ooh, sick burn. I don't know how he's going to survive that. Avi Yamini writes, "Tucker is anyone but America first." Oh, gosh, he couldn't be. Is he think he's going to allow Americans to think? This guy says the same thing. America first. Haha, that's now over. Doesn't he know that to be America first, you have to know that Americans can't think and they need to be propagandized and they shouldn't be able to hear both sides of an argument?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear this crowd portray America first as if that means that you have to sow quote unquote pro-America war propaganda, and that's the only thing you can do. You can't allow for, I don't know, the perspectives of, say, George Washington or Thomas Jefferson to prevail when it comes to entangling alliances, and the most dangerous one for the United States the last few decades has been Israel. And she's right about the claim that, Israel was running low on weaponry, certainly ballistic missiles. That's what Colonel Douglas Macgregor thinks too. And really, Israel's gambit in striking Iran was to get the U.S. embroiled in this affair and hope to enact the regime change Netanyahu's been calling for decades. He's constantly clamored about that. And she's right. It will come up again. So yeah, she's right on point here.
I do always do that, by the way. I like to always just think about our foreign policy on like a more molecular level. Like, could you imagine if you had, let's just say, two kids that were fighting and they get into a fight and you're like, what happened? But you're like, I don't want to hear what you say, only you. I only trust you. Tell me what happened. And like, we're just not going to hear this version at all. And no matter what, we're just going to go, but we're going to punish this individual without ever hearing their side. It's completely crazy that we wouldn't hear the other side. Doesn't mean the other person's telling you the truth 100%, but we know sure as hell American journalists are not telling us the truth at all. So let's hear both sides and try to, critically think. That's my idea here. Anyways, I'll show you a couple of clips here from that interview that has people freaking out. The first thing that I found so interesting was the discussion regarding a fatwa, okay? Because I'm going to tell you, truthfully, I came up in Zionist media accidentally just because I didn't really know much about Israel. And I was like, why not? Why wouldn't we want to defend people? Why wouldn't we want Jewish people to have a state? Like, I was very surface. And I was told repeatedly that a fatwa is issued, and it basically is for, sends a message to all the Muslims that if you see this person, you should kill them. Like, it's essentially a death threat. That is what a fatwa is. That is what I was told.
Yeah, same here. I was a dyed-in-the-wool neocon, if you can believe that, kind of broke out of that through, learning about liberty and the tenets of liberty and the Ron Paul revolution, but I was in the same boat there, and that is true. The war propagandists say that, a religious fatwa is issued just to call for terrorism or to spread violence and injustice throughout the Middle East, when really it just means a religious edict. And really one of the fatwas that I think they're going to bring up here, and we'll hear what Candace has to say, is in regard to Iran's prohibition on acquiring a nuclear weapon, a fatwa that was issued by the Ayatollah years ago, I think actually decades ago. So this has nothing to do with calling for violence toward others. It was Iran's position on acquiring nukes, which they didn't want to do. And, I wouldn't just usually take that at face value. In fact, I'll never take that at face value, just what, a ruler of a country says. But even U.S. intelligence says that they weren't trying to acquire a nuke. Tulsi Gabbard said that herself in her threat summary, her annual one, just 8 weeks ago. And Netanyahu wouldn't even, say that they had a nuclear weapon. He was on record day after the strike saying, they might be a year away. So, yeah, we'll see what she has to say, though.
Listen to what the Iranian president has to say, and then I'm going to show you the true definition of a fatwa, which kind of surprised me. Take a listen.
2 Iranian ayatollahs have issued fatwas against Donald Trump. What does that mean exactly, and what do you think of it?
To the best of my knowledge, they have not issued decrees or fatwas against any individual or against Donald Trump. And first off, it has nothing to do with the Iranian government or to His Eminence, the Supreme Leader of Iran. Or what they actually meant by the fatwa was in condemnation of an insult to a religion or religious personalities, and they were actually saying that this is deplorable, this is unacceptable. So it was not directed towards the U.S. president or any other individual, and there might be people with their own ideas and opinions, but I can assure you that the meaning of this fatwa should not be construed or considered as a threat against any individual.
Okay, so color me ignorant. Like I said, I was specifically told by people who I was working for and working with that it meant like this is a death threat, essentially, that once they issue a fatwa, that it means kill this person. And here is the actual definition of a fatwa. I just Googled this. It says a fatwa is a non-binding legal opinion in Islam issued by a qualified religious scholar known as a mufti on a specific issue. It serves as an interpretation of Islamic law.
Yeah, that's the truth, and it doesn't even have to be concerning, geopolitical things or, things that, we hear all about, wars in the Middle East. That is what the truth is. And hey, I'm not Islamic, I'm a Christian, but you have to sift through the propaganda here because the neocons and the Zionists have always used this as kind of an impetus, a launching point for their wars. They claim that bin Laden wanted to institute a caliphate and take over all the Middle East, and he was so close to doing that, if not for the United States having a 20-year occupation in Afghanistan, who, by the way, offered to give him up to a third party if the United States agreed to that. They didn't agree to that because they wanted war. So that's where we're at. Fatwas can concern many topics, and there have been issued even on the position of Iran's nuclear program. So yeah, that is the case.
And provides guidance to Muslims on various aspects of life, including religious practices and ethical dilemmas. Fatwas are not considered legally binding judicial rulings, but rather legal advice or directives based on Islamic teachings. Just want to read that to you because I was totally surprised that is what it was. It sounds like, if you're a Catholic and is this Catholic doctrine, and somebody has to furnish the answer to a yes or a no. That's what it sounds like. There could be more of it I'm missing, but that kind of caught me off guard because I just am constantly reassessing how unbelievably brainwashed I was previously.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. If you watch Fox News, you'll never get that angle of what a fatwa is, and it seems, oddly reminiscent of just about every kind of religious decision that's made as to whether something conforms with doctrine or not. But again, it's been the neocons and the warmongers propagandizing to demonize people in the Middle East for decades, and it's happened, since I was a young child. Especially since the Gulf War in 1991. But after the Gulf War, then we've had excursions in Syria and Yemen and Libya and, war with Iran recently. We've had the Afghanistan occupation. The Afghanistan and Iraq occupations lasted 20 plus years. We still have soldiers in Iraq. And a lot of this nonsense was justified on the basis that, all these people in the Middle East were issuing fatwas and death threats to the United States. Well, they brought it up again. It was the chance in Iran that we had to fear. Americans, don't worry about the fact that they haven't attacked the United States or attacked our soldiers. In fact, they tipped off Trump instead of attacking our soldiers. But did you hear their chants? So yeah, I'm glad Candace is covering this and the propaganda that, again, we need to sift through. You don't have to be an adherent to Islam to see that this is propaganda that calls for war.
And again, this is not a defense of Iran. It's not a defense of Israel. It's just basically me standing up and saying how absurd it is that our media lies to us repeatedly.
Yeah. Right.
Then, regarding whether or not Iran tried to assassinate President Trump. Now, that very tough sell for me. Matthew Crooks did not look like he had it in with Iranians, particularly. And the way that it disappeared from our media makes me think that maybe somebody else might have been involved that had a lot of power. Okay. Here is what he had to say regarding any assassination plots towards President Trump. Take a listen.
Has Iran ever backed an assassination attempt against Donald Trump?
This is actually what Netanyahu is trying to insinuate and to make your people or the president of your country to believe. But this is wrong because Netanyahu, as I said, has its own agenda. It wants to drag the U.S. into forever wars, as I said, and to bring more insecurity.
That's more truthful, by the way, than any U.S. politician almost, with the exception of maybe like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey. It is used as propaganda to drag America into wars. And you don't have to be pro-Iranian to believe that. That's just a fact. And you saw how Ted Cruz answered this when Tucker Carlson interviewed him. He said, there's an actionable plan to assassinate Donald Trump. Could he give any details on that? No, of course he couldn't. Why? Because it was propaganda designed to foment the regime change that guys like Ted Cruz have wanted there for decades. The John Bolton, the Dick Cheneys, the Paul Wolfowitzes of the world. They have always wanted regime change, and they know that Americans don't innately support it. So they have to invent these crafty propaganda schemes and, farcical assassination plots to justify it. And this was brought up last year, too. In 2024, you heard some rumblings, and they said they created a video about it. Well, the video, it's not... It just... There's so many absurdities about this, and it's not really clear that they have any basis for any of this. It's designed to be propaganda.
Security, instability, and unrest to the whole region.
Okay, well, you're definitely not going to get a disagreement from me regarding Netanyahu. But I just want to be very clear. He's our friend and our ally. Definitely.
Definitely. I like her sense of humor, at least. Definitely.
The politicians say so it definitely must be true. If I had to guess, some people that might have been on the Epstein list, it might have been like, almost the whole of Congress. But it's fascinating that the people are attacking Tucker for bringing you another version of events, like they attacked him when he sat down with Putin, because that almost should be the media's job if they were actually the fourth estate and were actually interested in making sure that our governments were not becoming too corrupt. They wouldn't attack journalists. Like I said, the journalists that are actually being attacked, if you Google someone's name and they're loved and celebrated by the media, you know that you should not be listening to that person. It's that simple. It really is that simple.
It is that simple. The people that tell you not to listen to Tucker because of this, not to listen to the Iranian president's interview, they don't seek truth. They're not out for veritas. They're out for propaganda. And trying to suppress alternative perspectives to the uniparty war narratives and uniparty war machine, the narratives that have drawn the U.S. into countless fruitless, senseless foreign wars during my lifetime, to say that, yeah, they're right. We should just, listen to those calling for war. That's what we're too used to right now. And I remember Dan Rather got a lot of flack because he interviewed Saddam Hussein, before the Iraq War, and he got a lot of flack for that too. But just imagine this. And you don't have to like anything about Saddam and his treacherous regime. But imagine if more people listened to that interview and were given a different perspective that led us to push back in a massive way against that stupid moronic war. that cost thousands of American lives, billions of dollars, and killed about 1 million people. Imagine if that pushback was substantial enough to stop that war. Stopping the wars before they begin by crushing the propaganda schemes used to sell them. That is what the American spirit is all about. That's what we need to do to sever these entangling alliances and get back to a true, absolute America first position. America only.
Because to tell the truth is to render yourself an enemy of the state. That is just the reality that I'm living and that I am accepting. But I remain optimistic. Why do I have a smile on my face? Because people are waking up. They are waking up to these tactics. And I get it. Maybe the Costers are bored because they've had so much power and they control the education system and they've brainwashed so many of us and they're controlling the congressmen and they're laughing at us and creating fantasy novels and just disappearing. I mean, everything of that it seems that they lock down, right? JFK's assassination, the Epstein files, it always pertains to whenever Israel's name is involved, that is just the reality. And people seem to be radically accepting that we've been deluded. We have been totally deluded.
Totally right, especially on the right, on the populist right. People are waking up to the influence that the Israeli government has in American politics. And it's really refreshing to see, as kind of a libertarian right-wing dissident, to see this. Is that Thomas Massey revealed this. Marjorie Taylor Greene revealed this. Tucker Carlson certainly, has taken that standpoint, at least to a moderate extent, saying, hey, what's this foreign influence in our government? What is AIPAC? It doesn't belong there. It's alien. I only care about my country. And to see Candace Owens talk about it too, it's really refreshing because dissident voices are waking up to this Israel first mentality and how it's guiding and steering America's foreign policy and has for decades.
Of course, our awakening is not going to come without a fight like hell, because I do believe there could have been maybe a place that was settled by political extremists on the basis of everything that I've researched. And that's why I started this book club. And it's going to get interesting. They are going to be extreme in trying to stop this awakening, but we also have to be just as extreme in our commitment to telling the truth. That's how I feel. That's why I wake up and do what I do every day. And that's why I'm so happy, because once you've committed yourself just to the truth, not to money, then I just feel like you're actually free. You are truly free. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Amen, Candace. There is a certain freedom to be felt by just being totally unbound by orthodox establishment opinion regarding foreign policy, regarding the truth, regarding journalism, and all sorts of issues like this that are all kind of intertwined. And what I love that she hit on there was that if you tell the truth, you're already an enemy of the state by default. How true is that? That is the ultimate axiom that kind of dictates our culture and our government. Certainly so. The great Ron Paul said that truth is treason in the empire of lies, and nothing is more true than that statement, than that cornerstone principle that dissidents have lived on for so long. And yeah, there's propaganda out there, and it's the United States that's part of it. And the job of everyday Americans is to get multiple perspectives and sift through it. And thankfully, I think it's becoming easier to do that. Easier and easier as the years go forward. Especially in the last few years, we've seen the rise of this new independent media, which is not all perfect, of course, but different perspectives are given to everyday Americans that peruse the internet now that they never would have gotten before. Watching cable news or reading the New York Times or, just getting the same standard narrative from the same talking heads, the Ted Koppels, the Dan Rathers, the, Peter Jennings. That was the only choices that Americans had for a long time. But now there's a whole new world, and people are opening their eyes. She's right. There's a great awakening to some extent happening on these issues, on these geopolitical issues, especially surrounding Israel. And she's right. They're going to pull out all the stops to try to end this awakening. They've already done it. Look at what they've already done. You're automatically considered an anti-Semite if you dare criticize Israel or even U.S. aid to Israel. It has nothing to do with what you think about the Jewish people in general or Jews or anything like that. It's a foreign government. We would not say this about someone that has a particular disdain toward France or toward Germany. They would not be automatically branded a racist. You can boycott individual American states like people on the left and right do, for maybe their abortion policies or immigration policies or, things such as that. But you can't boycott Israel. Then you're an automatic anti-Semite. And we've already seen this begin. Some states are expanding their hate speech codes to condemn levying criticisms against Israel. We've seen that, I think, both Arizona and Georgia already. And the Trump administration's deported people for criticizing Israel. And they tried to do that with Mahmoud Khalil, and he was here legally and had a wife and was having a child. But he dared criticize Israel, so they wanted to deport him. I think Trump sent several hundred people to the most dangerous Honduras prisons simply for that offense. And meanwhile, this seems like a way to sabotage any attempt at a mass deportation, because this is so unpopular in so many circles that it foils the attempt to do actual mass deportations that he called for, if that's your thing. Saying nothing about that. But Candace is right. This great awakening needs to continue. Tucker Carlson's interview with the president of Iran is great, just like his interview with Putin was great. Doesn't mean you have to like those people, but to be exposed to more perspectives about how America actually might be warlike, and they might be wrong some of the time, and their narratives might just be skewed. Americans should see those perspectives, decide if they're worthy of entertaining or not, and if not, to discard them, and if so, to embrace them, and if neither of those two things, to actually just take it in as, hey, that's another piece of evidence to consider when deciding my ultimate opinion on this issue. True journalism calls for the searching of veritas, the searching for truth above all other concerns, political, tribal, cultural, etc. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Is Candace Owens right about this? Are you glad that Tucker interviewed the president of Iran? What do you think about how this great awakening is unfolding? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to Candace also. She has an amazing podcast. I love the stories she's been covering lately. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. You will get advanced access if you do that to all of my videos before they go live on YouTube, and you'll support the channel. I appreciate that if you go to that length. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.